Joining a crowd does not erase your identity. It can replace the identity currently deciding what feels acceptable. A person can read every word, understand what they are doing, and still add one more cruel comment to a pile-on they would condemn from outside it. The change is quieter than madness or hypnosis. "I would never do that" becomes "we are right to do this." Private restraint has not vanished, but it is now competing with a temporary "we" that carries its own rules, rewards, and version of responsibility. Calling the crowd mindless makes the behavior easier to explain because nobody has to ask what the group gave each thinking participant. But other people can change what an ordinary person believes the moment requires. People do not become identical just because they gather, and the crowd does not produce one automatic reaction. The same pressure can lead one person to join, another to stay silent, and someone else to step forward. What changes first is often judgment. Everyone appears to agree, so the group's version of events starts to feel less like an opinion and more like reality. Belonging then supplies rules for what deserves praise, ridicule, restraint, or action, while anonymity can make the personal self feel less important than membership. Visible approval rewards whatever fits that shared position, and every repeated reaction makes the next one easier to justify. Responsibility also spreads across the group, allowing each person to feel that somebody else can object, intervene, or carry the consequences. These forces do not issue commands. They create pressure, permission, and a social answer that can become difficult to contradict when everyone else seems to see the same thing. In Solomon Asch's line experiments, the task was almost insultingly simple. Match one line to another of the same length. The participant could see the correct answer, but everyone else in the room deliberately chose the same wrong one first. Across the critical trials, participants followed that obviously incorrect unanimous majority roughly one-third of the time. They had not necessarily stopped seeing the lines correctly. They were weighing direct perception against the possibility that the entire room knew something they did not. Public disagreement also carried a cost, because giving the correct answer meant becoming the only visible person saying everyone else was wrong. Then one member broke ranks. The majority was still large, the lines had not changed, and yet even a single dissenter sharply weakened the pressure to conform. The crowd's authority was not coming from numbers alone. It depended on presenting agreement as complete as though no reasonable alternative existed. Once that surface cracked, disagreement became socially possible, and real crowds can build much more than one shared answer on top of that possibility. The line experiment showed how a group can bend one judgment, but crowds usually offer something larger than an answer. They offer a category: fan, defender, victim, believer, outsider, one of us. Once that category becomes important, the person can begin judging themselves less as a unique individual and more as a representative of the group. Its goals become more relevant, its standards more legitimate, and its reactions more informative about what the moment requires. That is the temporary "we" replacing the private "I" as the main guide for behavior. Reduced individuality does not uncover one primitive crowd personality hiding underneath everyone. It strengthens whichever norm belongs to the group that currently matters. A group built around humiliation can make ridicule feel loyal, while one built around discipline can make restraint feel like the obvious duty. The same shift can support cruelty, courage, obedience, generosity, or care without removing the person's ability to choose among them. Therefore, anonymity is not simply freedom from identity. Sometimes it makes someone feel less like a distinct person and more like what people like us are supposed to be. Anonymity does not remove rules. It changes which rules feel closest. Online, the person may be invisible, physically distant, free from immediate reactions, and able to treat the exchange as separate from ordinary life. Those conditions can lower restraint because embarrassment, authority, and consequences feel less immediate. They can also make personal differences fade, leaving each user easier to see as one more representative of the same side. That is what turns isolated impulsiveness into coordinated behavior. People are not merely acting without identity, but acting through a shared one. When the group rewards mockery, anonymity can make mockery easier to perform and easier to defend. When the norm favors honesty, support, or exploration, the same distance can help someone disclose what they would never say face to face. Reduced restraint is therefore not automatically toxic. It amplifies the direction already supplied by the temporary we. The blank profile does not reveal a hidden cruel self beneath social manners. But anonymity alone cannot explain why one expression keeps spreading until the thread appears to demand more of it. The thread does not merely show approval, it teaches the participant which version of themselves receives attention. In an analysis of about 12.7 million social media posts, positive feedback for moral outrage made users more likely to express outrage again later. A like, repost, or approving reply becomes evidence that this language fits the group and deserves repetition. The effect does not require someone to begin as an extremist. Repeated rewards can pull an ordinary user toward the performance their network keeps recognizing. Certain words also travel better inside the group. Across two large datasets, every additional moral-emotional word was associated with about a 20% increase in diffusion within ideological groups. Language that frames an event as disgusting, shameful, or morally urgent, therefore, gains more opportunities to be seen, rewarded, and copied. The pile-on can keep intensifying after its original point has been made because the platform continues paying attention to the people who restate it more forcefully. Therefore, each new reaction trains the next contribution, but growing numbers also make every contributor feel less like the person responsible for what the crowd is becoming. In a 1976 Halloween field study, more than 1,300 children arrived at ordinary doorsteps where the limits were clear and the temptation was small. Stealing became significantly more common when the children were anonymous and arrived in groups. The highest rate appeared when responsibility seemed assigned away from the ordinary members of that anonymous group. No single condition acted like a switch. Anonymity reduced identifiability, company reduced isolation, and displaced responsibility made the choice feel less personally owned. The same structure appears when hundreds of people witness online harassment. Each observer can see that others are present, which makes intervention feel available without making it feel specifically theirs. Silence then becomes easy to misread as evidence that the crowd approves, while every silent person may be waiting for somebody else to move first. The audience does not remove responsibility. It divides the feeling of responsibility among people who are still individually choosing whether to act. That is why one comment can feel negligible inside an attack, and one refusal can feel unnecessary inside an audience. But collective identity does not have to shrink responsibility. It can also teach strangers that another person's safety belongs to them. A crowd can dilute responsibility, but the same shared identity can also expand it beyond the individual. During emergencies, people who begin to see fellow survivors as part of the same group often coordinate, share information, and support one another instead of collapsing into automatic panic. Physical density also changes meaning depending on who the surrounding people appear to be. At the Hajj, stronger identification with the crowd reduced the negative effect of high density on perceived safety. The closeness remained real, but it felt less threatening when the people nearby were understood as fellow members rather than anonymous obstacles. A temporary "we" can therefore make restraint normal, assistance expected, and another person's safety part of one's own responsibility. The opposite can also be produced. Treating a crowd as uniformly dangerous can strengthen the sense that its members face a common hostile force. Institutional responses do not merely manage crowd behavior, they can help shape the identity and norms that emerge inside it. Therefore, one person is never entirely irrelevant because every visible act supplies evidence about what this particular we protects, rewards, tolerates, or refuses. The cursor returns to one comment inside a thread large enough to make any single contribution feel disposable. Yet every reply, we post, laugh, refusal, or correction becomes visible evidence of what this temporary we permits. Belonging makes the group standards matter. Apparent consensus makes them look obvious. Approval makes them repeatable. And shared responsibility makes the cost feel smaller. That pressure is real, and resisting it can mean standing alone while agreement is rewarded in public. Still, the crowd does not choose through your hand. You can reinforce the dominant norm, soften it, challenge it, support the target, or decide that silence would only leave the visible answer uncontested. One contribution may not reverse the crowd, but it can break unanimity and change what the next person believes is socially possible. The temporary we can influence the choice without becoming an excuse to pretend the choice was never yours.